Hey, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Brent Barclay. Welcome to Building Business Acumen for Sales Professionals. We did this training earlier today. I did a webinar earlier today, but we forgot to record it. So it's not going to have Mike and I going back and forth and maybe all the questions that were asked. I'll try and remember them and include them. But wanted to make sure we have a recording available for participants as well as those who didn't get a chance to go to the webinar today. Well, as we get going today, of course, the webinar today is all about how to analyze or how to assess your customers. And by understanding your customer strategy, their financial metrics and measures, but more importantly, how a partnership with your company really drives towards their success, the greater ability to close more deals and to really become that trusted partner. So with that in mind, I want to just start. We all hear in sales, we all hear this idea of everyone tells you need to talk with executives, right? We hear that all the time. The challenge sometimes is no one tells you what to talk about. So what do? We end up talking about our products, our services, features, advantage, and benefit. Now, I'm not here to suggest that that's not valuable to kind of communicate the features, the advantages, and benefits of your products or services. The challenge, though, is we often don't step back and get that big picture perspective of the customer. And so often when we're talking about our features and advantages and benefits, it may or may not be kind of connecting with those you're selling into. In fact, there was a study that was done in Forbes magazine where they talked about selling into executives, an executive's perspective about senior sales leaders coming in, trying to transact with them and their experience around them. Here's one of the executives commented about this type of experience. He says, the products or service were lobbed over the wall. They didn't connect to what our organization was trying to do, what my business strategy was, what I valued in the course of normal day. Here's a second one. And if somebody asked me, can you tell me about your organization, what your organization does? How big are you? I'm thinking, that's your homework. That's what you need to be doing. Executive number 3, with access to information online, I'm absolutely amazed how little salespeople know when they show up to talk to me about their products, services, company, etc. And I love this last one. As you think about the jargon that we use as sales individuals, use plain language, or better yet, use my language, the language of my business. That is really, really powerful. Using your language is less so. So obviously, this idea of getting with the executive is vitally important. But do I understand enough about their business? Do I understand what their strategies are, what their key metrics and measures are? And so when I'm sharing my products or services, I'm really making a business case how my products or service can really drive to the success of the customers I'm selling into. Well, that's what a business and financial acumen is all about. Interesting enough that there's some other statistics talk about only 20% of salespeople are successful in actually reaching the executive expectation and really creating value for them. So even though we say we should get to them, only about 20% are really reaching the expectations of those executives and creating value for them. In fact, only 1 in 4 get another meeting after those initial calls. So the very fact that you finally get to the executive, how do we make that experience as meaningful, as productive, and as value add as we possibly can? That's what I want to kind of walk you through today. So the question might be, what is it that executives want you to talk about? And when we did this earlier this morning, there was an ask, put it in the chat box. A number of things that stood out that I remember. They want us to talk about their business. They want us to talk about kind of their key strategies. They want to talk about the challenges they're facing, their industries, their markets, etc. In the end, they want us to understand their business so that when we're making the case as to why our products or services are important to them and valuable for them, we can see that alignment. Well, folks, what I'm going to share with you today, there's a simple framework that really encapsulates how to think about business, how to talk about business, how to execute around business. And we use this in all of our programs, our regular business acumen programs, but definitely with the Building Business Acumen for Sales Professionals. We're introducing you to these 5 fundamental drivers every company focuses on. Now, those of you who've been through our programs or maybe been to one of these webinars before, you'll remember these 5 fundamental drivers. Now, what I love about the model, it's simplistic. It's simplistic nature. In the end, we all have a basic understanding what cash is, profit, assets, growth, and people. But if you use this 5-driver model as a simple framework, as you then listen to what the executives are talking about and the customers you're selling into, be able, as you're having conversations with points of context, those that you're selling into, be able to track, what are they really focused on? Is it cash? Is it profit, assets, growth, or people? It becomes a nice little framework to help you kind of capture the strategic focus of the company, capture what metrics they're focusing on, etc. So as you think about cash, cash is king. It's vitally important in a business. And there's different metrics they'll talk about around cash. Very common, just like cash position. Sometimes they'll just talk about liquidity or cash available. Cash on hand, of course, cash from operations, or sometimes they'll just refer to it as cash flows, of key metric, as well as free cash flow. Of course, as we look at profitability, it's all about anything you can do to grow the top line of your customer's business, their revenue or sales, while managing or reducing their cost. Those are the two levers you have. Of course, they'll talk about gross profit, operating profit, net profit. Some other acronyms you might hear: operating profits, often referred to as EBIT, earnings before interest and tax. Or you also hear EBITDA, another form of profitability where companies focus on. So understand what those key metrics are that your customers are talking about, and then be able to say, how does a partnership with our company really drive to those key metrics and measures? Of course, assets, it's all about what do we have, what we call our asset strength. Of course, cash, technologies, inventories, intellectual property, and how did I then take that and deploy it to run my business, what they call asset utilization. There's this balance between the two. A lot of companies came out of COVID really struggling to make sure they had a strong cash position, so they're holding on to more cash. Well, I'm holding on to more cash, I'm not utilizing it, so my asset utilization, you'll see a decrease in that. So this is the balance that companies are really focused on. You'll see other companies who really succeeded during the downturn. For example, Amazon had tremendous growth during the downtime. Well, I've got all these distribution centers, I've got all these employees. How do I hire? How do I expand? How do I grow my asset base so I truly can keep up with the demand that we have in our organization? Those are tough decisions. Being able to show how your products or services really helps them to generate a greater return on the investment with you is absolutely what they're looking for from an asset perspective. When you look at growth, of course, growth, you'll hear executives talk about growth all the time, particularly if they're publicly traded. You'll hear that all the time. Of course, growth is very important. Now, what do they want to grow? They want to grow their cash. They want to grow their profitability. They want to have more assets to deploy and grow their business. Of course, the core of any business is going to be its people. Now, when we talk people, we're talking two groups. Those that buy or use your products or services, but also internally, how do we get teams to get greater execution? If you can make a business case how your products or services will really drive to greater customer satisfaction for their customers, or how it helps them to be more efficient in the organization to get things done faster, more efficiently, at a lower cost, then obviously you're going to be at the right place at the right time with the right products or services. Well, fundamentally, executives want to understand how it relates to the three financial statements: the statement of cash flow, income statement, and balance sheet. Now, if we had a full time to go through this program, I'd walk you through each one of those, give you some nice overview, how to think about the 5 drivers, how to use it. We'd look at each of the statements, etc. But we don't have time. This is a 45-minute webinar. But what I want to do is talk about a tool. You don't have to have gone through our program to be able to use this tool to do an analysis on your customers and be effective in that analysis, and then be able to be more prepared in your account planning as well as customer interactions. The tool is called the Customer Analysis Workbook. It's a resource that we've put together over our 19 years of experience of a simple way to get the strategic focus of a company, get the financial assessment of the company, then think about who you're selling into. With that information, you'll be able to assess what are their biggest challenges or potential opportunities and be able to align it with your products or solutions. And the last part of it is, how do I take that and execute around it? So what I want to do is I want to walk you through using this tool. And as you go through using this tool, I'll use it as if I'm selling into a company, but I hope you'll look at it through the lens, okay, if I was selling to this company, how can I use this information to be more effective in my conversations and discussion? Now, the company that I did it on is Honeywell. Now, Honeywell is a company we'd love to work with. We've worked with many companies within their industry, competitors, customers, etc. So would love the chance to work with them. I had a great opportunity a couple of weeks ago to meet with their VP of Global Sales Operations and Training. A great individual that I had a great time to kind of interact with. So what I did is I went through and did the analysis on Honeywell as if I had another chance to talk with this individual and was trying to sell into him. Now, of course, don't get caught up in who the company is. The real focus of this webinar is how to use the tool. So as I go through it, you're going to get some information. If you're interested in Honeywell, there's some great data points in there. But the bigger point is think about how you would use this if you were selling into Honeywell or whatever company you might be looking at. So let me start with the process. It's a 3-step process. First, you got to analyze the company, and I'll talk about the tools and resources to do that. Once you've done the analysis, it's then saying, okay, can I take that analysis and come up with 2 or 3 key objectives, key goals, challenges, opportunities that my products or services could really help them with? And that's the align stage. The last part is once you've done that, okay, here's the challenges, here's what I think we could do to help them. Then it's all about what are the next 3 things that you need to do. to move this client forward in your sales pipeline, et cetera. So we'll talk about how to do that. So with that in mind, let me jump into the analyze phase. When you go to the analysis phase, the first thing you got to do is access their information, access their messaging, access their financials, et cetera. Now, where do you go to do that? If I had more time, I'd jump in and show you some things on the web, but basically if they're publicly traded, there's a tremendous amount of information. So if you're selling in an enterprise company that's publicly traded, you're going to get a lot of detail. You're going to get their investor relations page, which has every quarter's earnings call, their transcripts, their financial statements, all is available to that. As well as you can get access to presentations that they might have from those, not just earnings calls, but many companies will do association presentations. Maybe an oil and gas executive is doing something as part of an oil and gas conference, and they'll do a presentation there. It's a great place to hear what's going on. Of course, if you're looking at a publicly traded company, look at their stock performance, whether it's going up or down, and what might be causing that. Now, not only can you look there, there's other resources I like to look at. Obviously, any form of a press release or news about the company is a great way to see. What are they talking about? How's the media looking at them, etc. Of course, a Google search is a great one. Wikipedia. If I type in Honeywell right now, I type Honeywell in, it's going to come up on the right-hand side. It'll have a link to a Wikipedia page, a little summary of a few details. For example, they started in 1885. They have 4 different focus areas, segments of their business today, but they have all sorts of products you can look at. All that information is there. It gives you kind of average employee size, a number of factors that might be interesting. Of course, other things you may not have thought of, going to their social media pages, like a LinkedIn page, or look at YouTube videos they might be presenting. You get to hear what do they focus on as well. You can also look at positions they have open. Right now, Honeywell, based upon LinkedIn, they have over 6,500 positions open just through LinkedIn. And various roles and responsibilities. Now, I sell into training and development organizations, and I noticed their director for global training and development position is open right now. Boy, I want to know who that person is once they get hired and potentially be an option for them. So anyways, there's a lot of resources. Now, if they're privately held, you're probably not going to get the financial information, but you often can get press release and news. If you go to their web page, you'll see some information like you would find on a Wikipedia. You go into their web page and look at the About Us. You'll see a lot of detail. They'll talk about kind of their mission, what they're trying to accomplish. Another thing I often look for is just type in the name of the company annual report. Now, they may not have, if they're privately held, obviously, the 10Ks that the publicly traded companies do, but often companies will do like a little annual summary of what they accomplished, etc. And so you can find a lot of detail about companies through those resources. If you want to access the financial statements, of course, as a publicly traded company, get access to the income statement, the balance sheet, and cash flow statements. A couple of things you would want to look for is what's called a 10K. That's the annual financial information, or a 10Q. That's another resource you can look at, and that gives you access to the quarterly data information. Every quarter, they'll provide a nice little press release that summarizes that data as well. So, step 1 of the analyze phase, get access to the information. Step 2, how do I get to the strategic focus? The tool I use is called the Executive Alignment Tool, and it's a very simple tool. All I'm going to do is I'm going to take the 5 drivers, cash, profit, asset growth, and people, and I'm going to listen to their communication. Maybe it's a press release. See what they said in their press release. Maybe it's a video they put out about some new product they're looking at. It might be a full-blown earnings call, transcript. It could be an annual report, communication, etc. Whatever it might be, I listen to it, I read it, etc. And all I'm going to do is every time they say something about cash, I'm going to put a little slash mark. Every time they say something about profit, assets, put a little slash mark. Invariably, you're going to get a total number of each of those in what you listened to or reviewed. Once you've done that, you answer these 3 questions. Which business driver seems to get the most attention? I love the second part. Don't leave that out. Why? Think about the context of who they're communicating to. What's going on in their industry? Obviously, in a year like today, we're dealing with today, and last year, the COVID impacts of what's going on in their business. Of course, the next part is what are the 2 or 3, or just generally, what are the main points the executive was trying to make? That's where you start to get strategy or clarity around kind of their focused areas. And then last, what are their goals and objectives moving forward? Now imagine if you did this with a customer and listen to what they're communicating, get a press release, and you guys say, what are the top 2 or 3 points they're trying to make? Are they talking about cash, profit, asset growth, and people? What are they talking about from a future focus? all of a sudden you go and have that opportunity to sell into an executive. They're not saying they don't know what's going on in my business. They say, how do you know so much about our business? So that's what I want to do. Now, in our program earlier today, I actually walked through and gave people a chance to do that. But I don't have anybody on the call because I'm recording this later. So here's how I'm going to just walk through like I did, and I'll kind of show you some things. So here's communication from their CEO, Darius Adamczyk. I'm not exactly sure how he pronounces his last name. Chairman and CEO. Here's what he said. We delivered another strong quarter that exceeded the high end of our second quarter organic growth sales. The moment I see sales, I immediately am coming over here and saying, okay, sales, that's going to be profitability for sure. Now, you might say, well, sales impact cash. I could also have it possibly up here. We're going to talk about now sales. Growth in sales is also a profit number as well. So I have growth, I have profit, and I have cash potentially. Segment margin. Now, this is a key metric for them. I learned through reading through their stuff. Segment margin is a big part. Now, they have 4 segments, and what's the margin each one of those are contributing? That margin is just a profitability metric. They take the profit that they're generating before non-controllable stuff like taxes and interest expense, etc. But how much segment margin? Now, if I can improve that margin, anything I can do to increase my pricing while reducing my cost is going to have a positive impact on that margin. So I've got another slash mark for profit. Adjusted earnings per share right there. That's going to be another slash mark for profitability. I love this. Growth and margin expansion in all 4 of our things. So margin expansion there. I got another one for growth. Now, what you're going to find, folks, as you do this, it's not an exact science. Meaning, if you and I were to read this exact sentence, you may have a couple more in an area, a couple less than an area. That being said, having done this over 1,000 times a year, over 20 years of doing this, what we find is invariably the top 2 or 3 drivers for everybody. We may have different numbers, but your top 2 or 3 rise to the top every time. Your bottom one typically rises to the bottom as well, or goes down for sure. So let's look at the second part. You kind of do this as you read through this. Which drivers stand out to you before I give an example? You might pause the video. Or I'll just go ahead and walk through. So we delivered organic sales growth. I'm starting to hear a metric. It's not just growth from acquiring other companies, but I'm looking at organic, growing from within, taking Honeywell's products or services and selling more of them. Organic growth is a key one. Of course, you got that sales again, which means I got some profitability. I got some growth there of 15%, led by double-digit growth. Again, another growth one in safety and productivity solutions. That's a segment of their business. Honeywell Building and Technologies as well, advanced materials and performance materials and technologies. So they're, all of them are growing. I mean, if you want to put a growth for each one, you absolutely could. But that's how you do it. Here's the next quote. I'll just put it up here. I'll wait for about 10 seconds. And you can go through it. Which driver seems to get the attention? Well, this is from Greg Lewis, their CFO, and he talks about, as Darius highlighted, we had a very strong second quarter with sales up, or notice that organically. I know as I'm talking to him, I'm talking about growing sales. I want to make sure I'm weaving in or making it, if you're selling into Honeywell, you want me to talk about how does your product service drive organic growth? Helping their products or services fly off the shelf, so to speak, or how your product or service helps to get them more deals, etc. Gives so with sales 15% organically to 8.8 billion. That's a dollar amount. Obviously, we got some profitability there. Let's talk sales and we'll talk growth again. You kind of see a broken record saying the same thing. Segment margin expansion, that key term again, segment margin expansion, 190 basis points. All you have to do is put a little decimal point. It gives you a percentage, 1.9% growth in their segment margin to 20.4%. Now you're starting to hear some cash stuff. Oh my goodness, we got cash up here. Free cash flow of 1.5 billion. We over-delivered on our, you might say over-delivered is a growth one if you think that, on our commitment, again, building on a strong quarter we had in Q1. Then they go through each of the segments and talk about sales growth organically. Sales growth organic. Now, folks, if you're selling into them, boy, right now you should be saying, okay, how does my product or service help to drive sales growth at Honeywell? Or how does my product or service help to reduce costs, which allows me, let me go back, which allows me to get a better segment margin. That's what you want to be able to speak to. You hear them talking about it all throughout. Well, folks, in the interest of time, I'm going to jump to, we didn't go through the whole call. This is their Q2 earnings call is what I did the information on, but I did it for you. So here I went through and I marked up. Now, if I'm doing an earnings call, I often like to break it up between what I call prepared remarks. Oops, and do that. Had my pen kind of get crazy on me. But I'm going to start with the prepared remarks. What did they say? Their communication, usually the first about 20 to 30 minutes, if you're listening to a company's earnings call, it's going to be around what they're focused on. Analysts then have a chance to ask questions. So if I'm doing an earnings call, I like to break them out. But if you're doing a press release, maybe there's a press release on a new product that they're doing. They talk about aerospace expansion. They talk about universal oil processing or development. I'll have to look at my notes again. But they're starting to see expansion on the oil side of their business, etc. I may see that, and I won't need to spread them out between prepared remarks versus analyst remarks. All I'm trying to see is what do they really talk about. As I went through and do the analysis, obviously to get 112 strokes, I'd have a lot of strokes over here. So sometimes I just do it on a paper. If I got the document myself, I just mark it up really nice and really easy to do it that way. Well, the outcome is 112 examples of them focused on growth, 69 on assets, 53 on growth, 37's on people, and then 15. So obviously, which one had the greatest focus? Right there, followed by here. Then you start jumping around a little bit. Well, at this point, I've gone through, I understand kind of where they're focusing. How do I make sense and start to take that information, consolidate it into something I can use as I create my account plan or get ready for a call? Well, that's the next step. You got to answer 3 questions. Which business driver seems to get the most attention and why? What are the 2 or 3 main points? And what are the goals and objectives? So here's the first question. Which business drivers seem to get the most attention and why? Well, growth, obviously. Well, I can answer that. That's this part. That's why I love. And why? Make sure you use that. Well, for one thing, they're speaking to investors. Any communication for your customers, where they're talking about investors, even if they're struggling, growth's going to be part of the discussion. They might say, we divested some assets, we sold off some assets, we've restructured our organization, and now we are ready to grow. So growth will be a very, in most cases, it'll be one of the top ones if you're doing an earnings call. If it's like a product announcement, well, obviously, growth may be a part of it, but it may be more around the asset, the tool, the resource, or whatever that they want to communicate as they're doing like a product launch, etc. Press releases may be something going on in their industry, so it may be another factor, but definitely growth, one of the factors as to why they're speaking to investors. The other reason, though, they're talking about growth, you think about, we're coming out of COVID-19. And we still have those issues, but 2021, we're all seeing, we're starting to see things going back to a sense of a new normal, etc. And for Honeywell, they outperformed on their guidance on all of their key metrics. I kind of say they're at the right place at the right time with the right products. Why are they talking about it? Because that's a great thing to share to the market. Investors love to hear that, hey, man, we outperformed on everything we said we'd do. We've outperformed. In fact, their CEO said this, and now he's been with them for 13 years. He says, the current end market macro dynamics are creating the best set of circumstance I've seen. In fact, he later says, I've not seen the setup for Honeywell any better since I've been here at Honeywell for 13 years. Why are they talking about? They're really speaking the market. Boy, if you're an investor, here's why you want to stay with us. If you're not with us, here's why you want to be with us. We're having success, we're recovering well, and we're going to have great success as we move forward. Now, one nice thing about these various ways you can access information, if it's an earnings call, if it's a town hall presentation, maybe it's an association presentation, they'll often have a slide deck available. I love the slide deck because it gives you a nice summary of information. For example, here's Honeywell talking about their 4 segments: aerospace, Honeywell building technologies, performance material and technology, and safety and productivity. Then it talks about what their reported was, and then what percent is organic. Again, if you're selling into Honeywell, you want to really be thinking about organic growth. That's something that we're hearing it all throughout. Definitely a key metric. Now, don't walk in and say, now I understand your most important metric is organic growth. What you would say is something like, hey, as I was listening to your earnings information, I noticed that there's a lot of talk about organic growth. Does that seem to be the key metric they're tracking for you and your segment of the business? Let's learn more about it. What are the drivers you have that focus on? that qualifying, that information allows me to then say, okay, well, let me tell you how a partnership with Acumen Learning or a partnership with your company, how we can drive towards growing organically for your organization or your segment of the business. So that's the first one. I put another one on, even though growth by far was the biggest at 112. Assets was somewhere in the 60s, I think, 63 or so. Assets was another one that they talked a lot about. Now, what do I mean by assets? Everything from products and services to different segments of the business, what they're kind of focusing on, how they're deploying those businesses, etc. We delivered another outstanding quarter that exceeded the high end. Excuse me, I was going to sneeze. High end of our quarter organic sales growth. Again, there's that term. Segment margin, adjusted earnings per share. 3 key metrics. I know those are going to be important to them. Think about how our products or service drive towards that. With top line growth, of course, that's revenue or sales, and margin expansion for all 4 segments. Where are they looking for key new markets or end markets for growth? Commercial aero, they're seeing that recovery take a little bit longer, but they expect through 2021, 2022, you'll start to see nice recoveries. Building and infrastructure, a lot of growth there. Energy starts to come back. And then warehouse automation, absolutely. As you listen to these earnings calls, everybody's talking about how technology transformation, automation, etc., how that can help them be more efficient, more effective what they're doing. And Honeywell plays a key role. So that's the first part. What are they talking about? And then think about, if you were selling to Honeywell, how would this information help you in your conversations, your discussions, etc.? Well, next question, what are 2 or 3 main points? Now, I did a little lazy part as they actually highlighted these 5 specifics. So it's a little more than maybe you'd look at. Sometimes they highlight them if it's an earnings call, but sometimes you got to kind of extrapolate. Based upon what they're saying, here's probably what they're talking about or key messages. In an earnings call, sometimes these large conference presentations, sometimes marketing videos, etc., they'll give you what those key areas are. So for them at Honeywell, here's what they were. Another outstanding quarter, over-delivered second quarter sales, segment margin, adjusted EBITDA. If you're selling in, those should be cemented. By this time, if you were selling in, those should be cemented in your brain as far as things to think about how your product or service and conversations around how your product or service can drive towards those. All 4 segments delivered top line growth and segment expansion, order growth for the future, strategic initiative gaining momentum, the marketplace, and they're raising their full year guidance. Now, again, probably more than you wanted to know, but if you were selling into them, this gives you great information to say, how does our product or services impact those key points or goals, objectives. So what are they saying for the future? Number 1, reach out. They want to reach and outperform their increased metrics. All 4. Those are the 4 key metrics. By this time, if you're selling in, you should be aware and how your product can hit those. And here they give a nice kind of describing the growth in those metrics. So having that data points, where they're trying to grow, those key metrics, see that updated guidance. This is Q1. This is where they were at the start of the year. So you see 3 different examples, which really suggests you're getting this nice growth trend for Honeywell. Well, other things that goals and objectives, they've got a big initiative around $1 billion net operating cost reduction. Now, if you're selling into them, that may be an additional expense. Now, if it's capital expenditure, maybe it wouldn't be. But think about, how does your product or service help to reduce net operating expenses? That could be a message for you to think about. And then finally, acceleration of strategic growth vectors. They talked about kind of 4 specific areas that they see a lot of growth opportunity. Now, if you're selling in and have any products or services that align with any of these kind of key segments, obviously that would be a data point to have available as you have your conversations. Well, at this point, folks, what do I know? I know key metrics, 4 key metrics they talk about. I know some of them about their strategy and where they want to focus in the new year. They're having a great year and they want to continue that momentum. A few of their areas, commercial aerospace, as well as oil and gas, still recovering, but expect to see some nice momentum in the future. Other segments seem to be already performing nicely, etc. Well, the next part is to see, well, what do I see in the numbers? So the next tool that we use is called the Navigating the Financial tool. Let me just kind of explain how it works. Obviously, I don't have anybody here to participate with me, so I'm just going to kind of walk you through it, and then I'll show you the numbers. So this is a tool. What it does, if you come to our programs, we talk about the 5 drivers, which I just shared with you. Let me go back here. The 5 drivers are here. So if you come to our program, that framework's there. The key metrics in our programs we often talk about. When I'm doing this with a customer, I'm looking at their companies, the customers they're selling into. What are the key metrics their customers are looking at? We'll introduce how to look at the statements and understand them. But if you don't have that, you can still use this tool. What it does is you got the 5 drivers, the key metrics and measures right here, and then where do you go to find the information? If there's any sort of calculation you have to do, it's all included in this document. Not only can you look at kind of their current performance, but you can do whatever comparison you want to. If you want to look at Q2 of this year versus Q2 of 2020, you could do that. If you want to do the first 6 months of 2021 versus the first 6 months of last year, you can also do it by looking at a customer or competitor. So how do you do that? Well, you come in and you say, I want to get cash and cash equivalent. What line item am I looking for? I need to get the line items the same term. In some cases, it's not the same term. You'll see it down here. The genius of this tool, in my opinion, is right here. It tells you where to go to find it. I'm going to look at the balance sheet. So I go to the balance sheet. I look right here. And I know, because I've taken the class, that on the asset section, they're listed by most liquid down to least liquid. So most liquid, and when we talk liquid, it either is cash or how quickly it converts to cash. Right there, you got it. It either is cash, converts to cash. That's the measure. How much is it? 11,427,000. I got it right there, the first answer. Now I want to look at their cash flow from operation. I'm looking for this line, net cash provided by operating activities. What statement am I going to go look at? Okay, got to go to the cash flow statement. So I pull up my cash flow statement. I'm looking for net cash provided by operating activities. Here's my operating activities seconds, what I'm looking for. If you've taken our class, you've had some exposure. If not, just look for it. Right here, you got the number. $2,256,000,000. Now, this represents the cash they generate from their core operations minus their day-to-day operating expenses. So this is the cash that's left over. They can use this cash to invest in your products or services. They can or invest in their company. They can use this cash to pay down debt, to get money back to investors, etc. So there we go. We got the second number. Well, you kind of see how it works. If I want to get my next one, I'm going to my total revenue. That's on my income statement. You'll see that right here. Well, in there, I'm going to go ahead and get my net income because I got to get both of them. So let me jump there. And you'll notice they do it by a 3-month. So just for the quarter, or I can do it year to date, the first 6 months of the year. So how much revenue did they generate in the Q2? $8,806,000,000. How much net income did they generate? $1,430,000,000. If I want to look at for the year to date, here's what I'm going to see. 17 billion versus 2.8 billion. Now, one of the things I like to see is I like to see my top line go up. I also like to see my bottom line to go up. I like to see that earnings per share to go up, and all 3 of them are going up. So right now, I can see some good data points. I go back to the tool. I put in the new revenue, get my net income. Now I'm doing it for the year-to-date numbers for 2021. It's at $2,857,000,000 to get my margin divided by the total revenue or sales, $17,262,000,000. Gives me a 16.6%. Now, if you've been in one of our classes, you'll remember, what does that tell me? That says for every $100 Honeywell brought into their company in fiscal year, first 6 months of 2021, they generated $16.60 of profitability. That's how you do it. So you go through to the rest of the calculation, their equity ratio, how financially strong are they, what sort of return. Now, this is only half a year, so I'm getting a lower return, but it's only half a year. Of course, I'd like to see these nice growth numbers. If I want to then compare that to year-to-date 2020 numbers, I can see automatically that my cash position actually has gone down the first year. The cash I'm generating slightly down, although it's relatively slight, but my net income is up, or my revenue's up, my net income's up. I see some nice growth numbers down here. My percentage return or equity ratio is stronger, so greater financial position, as well as a better return for that quarter. Now, if you don't want to look there, you can also look at a competitor. Here's Raytheon. So if you're selling into Honeywell and you want them to see how Raytheon's performing and in partnership with you, really help them to improve their numbers, then you could use this type of data for that. Well, at that point, you do a quick analysis. There's just 2 simple questions. Based upon the calculations, how well did they perform on the key financial metrics, the NTF? Well, obviously, their numbers were strong, 8.3 increase. We saw all those increases. Net income is also increasing. Earnings per share is increasing. This is a question to kind of see if what they're saying in their strategies align with what the numbers tell you. Does their performance on the key metrics align with their stated commitment? And I'd say absolutely yes. Across the board, they've seemed to improve on all of their metrics. So at this point, I've looked at their strategy. I've now looked at their financial performance. If you were selling into them, you start to see a narrative, a story that you can kind of think about and then say, well, how does a partnership with your company drive towards the result? The last part of the analysis phase is all about who you're selling into. When you sell your product or service, you're not just selling to the business. Now, you want to understand their strategies. You want to understand their key metrics. You want to understand how your product or service can drive towards that. But you also want to know who you're selling into. Now, in this case, it's the VP of Global Sales. For me, it may be an operations person for you. It may be a segment of their business that you're selling, providing products or services. Well, for me, I'm selling to a VP of sales. What do I think? Where would they focus around the 5 drivers? Obviously, growth. Based upon my interactions with this VP, definitely they're focused on organic growth within their company. And how does the current sales force drive towards that? Well, this idea of understanding their customers, that may be a focus. How can I help my salespeople understand their customers better? So does my sales team truly understand customer business and how a partnership with Honeywell really drives towards their success? That may be a focal point for them. Of course, profitability. One of their key metrics is that segment margin expansion. So not all revenue is created equal as you think about sales. Sometimes we get so caught up in closing the deal, we're not really looking at the margin or how the deal is going to impact your margin. So that may be a focus of how can I help my sales team understand that let's close deals, but let's also make sure they're driving towards that profitability metrics that we're focused on here at Honeywell, et cetera. Now, of course, at this point, I'm not going to walk into the sales individual and say, hey, look, I got all the answers. Here's where you focus. Here's all your challenges, et cetera. This is information, and the real benefit of this is you're prepared. You're prepared to kind of have conversations around what they're driving towards in their business. Make a business case how your product or service will drive towards these. The expectation is not to go in and say, let me tell you all this stuff I researched and let me spill my guts about all that information. You're not going to get anywhere. But being able to use information like this, like for example, now I was reading through your most recent communication. It seems like this organic growth is a big factor they're focused on. How do you look at that from your sales team perspective? What are they really looking at? As your current projects you're looking at, et cetera? How do they impact that? Or maybe it's from the segment margin perspective and being able to say, okay, I notice segment margin seems to be from a sales perspective, what are the key levers you're looking at? Is it, profitability of each deal? What do you kind of look at? In the end, I'm trying to see if what I'm thinking might be their focus is truly their focus. And if it is, then I'm ready to go to the next step where I start speaking to the challenges and opportunities, et cetera. So that is the analyze phase. Let's jump in the line phase. Now, this is where it all comes together. You've done that analysis, which, by the way, if you're doing a full-blown earnings call, you're probably looking at 45 minutes to an hour to go through that process. The calls themselves are usually about an hour. That being said, you don't have to go through that whole process. If I only have a few minutes, and I'm getting on a call with someone, I might jump to a Wikipedia and see where they focused on from a business perspective. I might try and scan their most recent press release and see what they're talking about, et cetera. In the end, you don't have to go through the full analysis, but I absolutely recommend on a quarterly basis to do this type of analysis on your key customers. Once I've done that analysis, I'm looking for what are the opportunities, what are the challenges they're facing, the opportunities where my products or services can really drive to their outcomes. Now, if you're selling into Honeywell, at this point, there's some key things you'd want to think about. The key metrics of segment margins, organic growth, cash flow are definitely things you'd want to think about. Now, in my case, thinking I'm selling into a sales leader, one potential business challenge they might have is understanding customer strategies, key metrics, and how a partnership with Honeywell will drive their success. Are our sales team very focused on the customer and sending the products over what was the term they used earlier? I forgot what they used, but just send it over the wall, so to speak, without really understanding how it fits within an organization. Well, instead, you're really looking at what are they trying to do and then be able to have that conversation. So that may be a challenge. Of course, this segment margin expansion could be a big challenge for them. I don't know, but I would want to clarify, right? Salespeople focus on the sale rather than how profitable the sale might be. If that's the case, boy, I would want to be able to help them think about how to think about the profitability of what they're doing. Of course, another potential challenge or opportunity is this idea of as segments recover from the pandemic, figure out how to truly be a trusted partner with their customers and what everybody's calling this new normal. What's changed about your customer base and how you interact with them? And how can products or services from your company really help them to succeed? So that's how you do it. Now, of course, for you, they may be different potential challenges. They're really having a hard time getting access to this inventory, and I have a plethora of it. So, boy, I really want to help them see that, hey, you can get access to this supply chain opportunity, et cetera, or these products or services that you're looking for. I'm the right supplier for you, et cetera. Well, in my case, because I'm selling training, of course, on this first one, our building business acumen for sale and this tool that we're going through would be a great resource for them to take to their teams and walk them through how to do it, and then have them do this on their key customers they're selling into. Of course, on the segment margin, well, in our business acumen for sales program, we spend a lot of time on talking about the economics of a deal and how to think about that, how to articulate and get the best profitability for the deals that you're trying to set up and really create that win-win with your customer. And then finally, another potential solution is let's help them build their sales team's business and financial acumen while providing tools, continue to make the business case for your products or services. Really how to use those tools to help them understand the new normal and make a business case for your products or services. Now, of course, if we were doing this live, we had time, and I was actually selling, I'd practice the pitch. Now, the pitch is not just, here's my solution. It would be something like this. I understand, segment margin expansion is a real big a metric. I'm hearing your executives talk about. How does that impact your sales organization? What are you really focused on around that? Are there other things you're focused around from a profitability perspective? We're focused on the top line revenue gen. Absolutely. Now, I noticed they also talked about organic growth. How do you see that as you sell your products or serve organic versus inorganic growth? Well, in the end, everything for us is organic growth because we've already acquired the business, et cetera. Anyways, I'm clarifying it, right? Which then helps me, once I'm clear about it, be able to talk about, okay, well, here's how I think we can help drive those results that you're looking for. Folks, at this point, you got a lot of information. You got the alignment, how you can align in next conversation. What am I going to do to act? The last section of the tool is all about action. What are the next 3 actions you need to take with this customer to move the partnership forward? Basically, what are you going to do and when are you going to do that? What am I going to do? I kind of have these high level and a little more detail. For me, of course, I'm selling training and development. I've met with this individual from a sales perspective. I want to get on their calendar. I want to spend some time to connect the next couple of weeks. What do I want to talk about? I want to diagnose. I've gone through Q2. I want to see if what I'm seeing is actually what he's dealing with, what his challenges are. If not, clarify what those challenges might be. So I might share some of my analysis, some of the insights like I described. I know segment profit. How does that impact your sales processes? I notice organic growth is a big deal. How do you impact that? What do you, et cetera? He mentioned, one of the things he didn't mention to me is he's already got a solution. So he also said, though, after seeing the presentation that we did around how to use business acumen to close more deals, he said, actually the solution I have is a little different than what you do. I just want to see if there's any potential opportunities to go head to head with that company that has a solution, or maybe how we might complement what he's trying to do, et cetera. So that would be the point of my conversation. Number 2, determine other groups we might be able to work with. As I said, he's already told me he's got a solution. If in the end he doesn't really have a solution and maybe it's just about timing, maybe in the future there'll be an opportunity, then I want to work across the whole enterprise. I want to see if they can introduce me to whoever's over that selling, training, and development as a global company. Not just sales, but through the masses, right? Executives, individual contributors, understanding their business better so they can help execute around their business strategy. Now, of course, as I said earlier, I looked at their Indeed and I noticed they've got a director of global training and development. So once that person gets in place, this individual becomes a contact. I can reach back. Hey, did they get that position filled? Love to get an introduction, et cetera, if they're comfortable doing that. The last thing I would do with this, assuming this first one there wasn't much opportunity, I call it a trickle campaign. What is that? Well, I've met somebody. I've had a good relation, good connect. He presented, I presented at a conference, and it seemed to work quite well. In the end, I want to stay in touch with them. Every 3 to 6 months, I want to make some sort of connection with them. What I find is it's often about timing around this stuff, but as well, kind of see what they're doing. And there may be opportunities as we get new products that we want to get some opinions from sales leaders. He becomes kind of a networking individual, somebody I know who I can reach out and say, hey, there's some stuff we're thinking about. Would this be something that would be helpful in your organization? Or how would you tweak it, et cetera, as a subject matter expert? Well, folks, that's the tool. Now I've got 3 things. I can go put them in my CRM. I can put my tasks. Here's what I'm going to do. When am I going to do it? I can share it with my supervisor and have some accountability around that and start to execute on my opportunity to meet with these executives and sell into them. That's what I want to do. Well, in the end, that's the last part of the process, is that act phase. So as you look at that act phase, it's all about what are the next 3 things you're going to do. Well, now I've got this research. I've got it for Honeywell. I've got great information. If I'm selling it to them, I know what they're trying to focus on. Got a good idea. Now, the wisdom, if I was going to say there's any caution around this, make sure after you do it, it's so interesting as you spend that amount of time doing this assessment, whether it's 5 minutes or an hour or 2 going through this. In the end, be cautious about just trying to share it all at once. That's not the purpose. You're trying to understand their business so you can truly be a trusted partner. You're already an expert on the things you sell, the products you provide. It's now about how do you have conversations that help you understand more about what they're really focused on so you can make that business case. So in the end, it's about, who's next? What are the next company I do that analysis? It's not just one client. There's multiple clients you're selling into. This tool will help you. Well, folks, as I said at the beginning, I'll end at with the same point. My guarantee is you use this tool with your teams, get better and better at understanding your customers, public, private, nonprofit, whatever data you can get. Think about it from the context of the 5 drivers. If you can get financial metrics, how are they performing around, or look at competitors in their industry or customers in their industry that might have financial data. Use that as a way to understand the customer better and then be able to make that business case. And then in the end, what's going to happen is you won't have those executives making the comments we had earlier that the salespeople just don't understand my business. Instead, you'll get comments like this. Philips Healthcare we worked with. Business acumen helps reps understand the trade-offs buyers wrestle with day in and day out, which makes it easier to see the big picture and add value. Hologic said this: grateful the delivery was different from several of my college professors. As a result, the group had fun learning and was absolutely engaged in the learning. And then T-Mobile said we saw a positive lift in leveraging 10Q, and annual reports to aid our sales meetings. Folks, in the end, it absolutely is valuable and helpful and something that hopefully you can use with your team. To wrap up, our goal is to give you tools that will help you build your business acumen, to truly understand your customers. Once they understand that you understand what they're trying to do, you move from that salesperson to a trusted partner. That's what business acumen is all about. So to wrap up today, to get access to the workbook, go to acumenlearning.com/webinar. You can access it. Our next sales and marketing webinar will be on the topic of business acumen beyond sales groups. Our CEO and founder, the author of our book, Seeing the Big Picture, Kevin Cope, will be doing that on September 9th. You can register through this website. We also have an online training. If you want a deeper dive or refresher on basics of business and financial acumen, we've got a self-paced program you can look at. Or if you're interested in bringing us in for your teams, please reach out to us. There's a place to make that request as well. Well, folks, it's truly been a pleasure spending some time with you. Even though nobody's here, I'm doing a recording, but hopefully this is helpful to you. Thank you very much and have a great day.